So there are two terms that are bounded about a lot in this community, isn't there? There's one, inner child, and two, ego. So what's the difference between the two? Is there any? Or are they the same? Let's talk about this. So first, it's probably best to define what we mean by inner child and what we mean by ego in the first instance. But before we do that, I want to introduce you down below to many of the free offerings that we have on this channel, be that breathing practice to stoke up some Shakti in the system, meaning energy, the introduction to Hatha Yoga down below, the free community either on Discord or Facebook, but most importantly, if you're ready to take your journey to the next step and you're ready to really see what's out there or in here for you, then we're offering a 6-month immersion training. It's an incredibly powerful process, and if you're willing and ready to invest in yourself, then this is the best option for you. The application form is down below for you to fill out should you wish. So, ego, inner child. What's inner child? Well, inner child is, from my understanding, and I'm open to being wrong, and I'm sure there'll be a few comments down below saying, Jamie, you're wrong. And I'll be like, okay, namaste, love and light. Of course, it's so insincere, isn't it? So I take it back. But what is inner child? Inner child is this, well, let's bring up the analogy of a child. You know, when we're in our childhood, sometimes we are conditioned to believe that we're not good enough, or sometimes we're conditioned to believe that we have to be perfect so that we get love or something. Usually there's some form of neglect of love in there, and so the inner child plays up to get the attention that it so deeply craves, right? So the inner child is exactly the same. It's just manifesting now in the form of thoughts and tendencies inside the system. Please excuse the WhatsApp. Let me close that down there. And so this is the inner child. Now, ego is exactly the same. Now, there's a great sage called Sage Patanjali, and he basically created modern yoga, or at least the framework surrounding it. And he says that ego is to identify with that which is phenomenal, meaning if we can observe it and if it's finite inside of ourselves, it's ego. So what does that really mean? Well, we have the tendencies or beliefs inside of ourselves, don't we, that believe we're either better than people or inferior to people. Both of these are ego. Why? Because sometimes I feel better and sometimes I feel worse, says the mind, doesn't it? This is ego. But also emotions are part of that egoic structure, according to Sage Patanjali. Why? Because they're temporary. They come and go. They're visitors in the system. Now, when we see this description of both of these things, we can begin to see that the inner child and the ego are the same. They're exactly the same thing. We use that one term, ego, because it's easy, but it's the same, you know, what could we call it? Like shadow work, huh? The one that needs to do the shadow work is also ego. The one that's not accepting the shadow side of ourselves is ego, isn't it? The inner child is ego. It's that unfulfilled childhood trauma. When I say that, what I mean is trauma causes a great deal of angst and quite a lot of emptiness inside, doesn't it, after a time? And it's that emptiness that we're trying to fill with, or that void that we're trying to fill with the identity structure of the child that was perhaps abused, but maybe perhaps just neglected or something. I say just, it's still a big thing, you know, and it's trying to get the attention from the outside world and from yourself that it never got from the parent or whatever. Ego is exactly the same, isn't it? So what's ego trying to do? Well, ego is trying to protect us, isn't it? Inner child is trying to protect us. What does that mean? It's a bit difficult to see sometimes, but what does it want? What's its desire? Well, the basis of ego is fear. isn't it? That's why it feels it needs to protect it. And this is why we should never make a mockery or say anything bad against the ego, because it's necessary. It protects us from things like, for example, situations that might seem painful, from getting out of our comfort zone so that we don't grow through fear of failure. Well, how's that protecting us? Well, it's protecting us by keeping us safe, isn't it? And we recognize as we go through this journey, we want to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, isn't it? Because everything that we truly desire in this life is just outside of our comfort zone, and it's going to feel like hell as we eke outside of our comfort zone just for a few moments before, boom, we realize, oh, I can do this thing that I've told myself for so long that I can't do. Why? Because the ego's protected me from it. Why? Well, because the ego is kind. Isn't protection a kind intention? Yeah, of course it is. This is why we shouldn't reject the ego or fight with it, because it's just trying to be your buddy. It's just trying to protect you. Now, does it actually do that? The answer is no. No, it doesn't. It's like an overbearing mother, isn't it? They will tell you what's best for you, and you will do that, and if you don't do that, you're in trouble. And the reason they do it is because they want to see you flourish and have a great life, and so they're protecting you because they've recognized some hardship that they've gone through or something like this, and it's their best effort, isn't it, to protect you. But it doesn't protect. The intention is kind, they mean well, but in fact the effect is toxic, much like the ego. So maybe a practice could be gratitude towards the ego if we want it, rather than fighting with it, because it's feeding from fear. Ego's fuel is fear. And does gratitude sound anything like fear? No, it's the complete opposite, isn't it? It's the water to the fire of fear. Gratitude is water. Fear is fire. Can the ego sustain itself with the fuel of water? No, it can't, because water puts the fire out. Anyway, I hope this helps as a little comparison between the inner child and ego. Have yourself a lovely evening. Namaste.